The morning sun slowly rose over the small village, casting golden rays through the thick branches of the ancient banyan tree. Under its shade sat Grandmother Anaya on a weathered wooden bench, smiling at the children playing nearby. Though life had never been easy in this remote corner of the world, she had never let hardship steal her smile. Her silver hair gleamed in the dappled sunlight, and though her face was etched with deep wrinkles, her eyes sparkled with wisdom and warmth that had guided villagers through countless troubles. In this village, life followed the rhythms of nature. Farmers tilled their fields from dawn till dusk. Women carried water from the well in earthen pots, balanced expertly on their heads, and children played with homemade toys in the dusty lanes. It wasn't a life of abundance, but there was a certain peace in its simplicity. And at the center of this community was Grandmother Anaya, whose gentle presence provided comfort to all who sought it. One particularly hot afternoon, Maya approached the banyan tree, her shoulders slumped and her eyes swollen from crying. At just 28, her face already showed the strain of worry. Her two young children were at home with a neighbor, allowing her way in this rare moment to seek counsel. She knelt beside Anaya, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grandmother, I don't know what to do anymore," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's been 3 months since my husband left for the city to find work. He promised to send money, but we've received nothing, not even a letter. My children ask for him every night, and I have no answers. Our food stores are nearly empty, and I fear what tomorrow will bring. What if something terrible has happened to him? What if he has forgotten us? What if he never returns?" Anaya looked at Maya with compassionate eyes and patted the ground beside her. "Sit, my child. Tell me, when you lie awake at night, what thoughts fill your mind?" Maya adjusted her faded sari and sat down, wiping tears with the edge of her garment. "I think of all the terrible possibilities, Grandmother. I imagine my husband lying hurt somewhere with no one to help him. I picture him finding a new life in the city and forgetting about us. I see my children growing thinner each day and myself unable to provide for them. These thoughts haunt me day and night." The old woman listened patiently, her weathered hands folded in her lap. When Maya finished speaking, Anaya nodded slowly, understanding etched in every line of her face. "Maya, my child, our minds are like gardens. The thoughts we plant and nurture are the flowers that grow. Right now, you are planting seeds of fear and watering them with your tears. Is it any wonder that your garden is filled with thorns?" Maya frowned, not quite understanding. "But Grandmother, these are not just thoughts. These are real problems that I face. How can I think differently when my reality is so harsh?" Anaya chuckled softly, a sound like rustling leaves. "Let me tell you a story, my dear. A story that was told to me by my grandmother, and to her by her grandmother before that." She cleared her throat and began, her voice steady yet soothing. "Many years ago, in a village much like ours, there lived a poor farmer named Ravi. A terrible drought had destroyed his crops, and a sickness had taken his wife. Left alone with 3 small children and no means to feed them, Ravi fell into despair. Each morning he would wake up thinking, 'Today will bring more suffering. Today we might starve.' And each day his fears seemed to come true. One evening, as Ravi sat by the village well, contemplating his misfortunes, an old sage passed by. Seeing the farmer's dejected face, the sage stopped and asked, 'Why do you look so troubled, my son?' Ravi poured out his sorrows, describing his failed crops, his lost wife, his hungry children, and his fear of the future. The sage listened carefully, then reached into his bag and pulled out 2 small pouches. "I have something for you," the sage said. "In these pouches are seeds. They look identical, but they are very different. The seeds in the first pouch will grow into plants that bear bitter fruit. The seeds in the second will produce the sweetest fruit you have ever tasted. Each morning, you must choose which seeds to plant in your field. Choose wisely, for what you plant will determine what you harvest." Confused but desperate, Ravi took the pouches and returned home. The next morning, he stood in his barren field, holding both pouches. "This is foolish," he thought. "How can I plant anything in this dry soil?" But remembering his hungry children, he decided to try. He chose the second pouch, hoping for sweet fruit, and scattered the seeds across his land. To his surprise, as soon as the seeds touched the ground, a light rain began to fall. It wasn't much, but it was enough to dampen the soil. Encouraged, Ravi continued this practice each morning, always choosing the second pouch, and each day, a little rain would fall. Weeks passed, and green shoots began to appear in Ravi's field. The village headman, seeing this, offered Ravi work repairing the village well. With this small income, Ravi could feed his children while tending to his growing plants. Months later, Ravi's field was lush with plants bearing the sweetest fruit, just as the sage had promised. Villagers came from far and wide to buy his produce, and Ravi's fortunes changed completely. One day, the sage returned to the village and found Ravi in his flourishing field. "I see you chose wisely," the sage said with a smile. Ravi bowed in gratitude, but then asked curiously what was really in those pouches. "Was it magic?" The sage laughed. "The pouches contained the same ordinary seeds, my son. The magic was not in the seeds, but in your choice. When you chose the pouch you believed would bring sweetness, you planted hope in your heart. That hope gave you the strength to work your field despite the drought. Your positive expectations attracted positive circumstances. The rain that fell was not magic, it was simply that you were finally ready to notice and appreciate it." Anaya paused and looked at Maya, whose tears had stopped as she listened intently to the story. "Do you understand, my child?" Anaya asked gently. "The seeds in the story are like our thoughts. Thoughts of fear and despair will grow into more fear and despair. Thoughts of hope and possibility will grow into opportunities and solutions." Maya considered this. "But grandmother, are you saying my problems aren't real? That they're just in my mind?" Anaya shook her head. "No, my dear, your problems are very real. Your husband's absence, your dwindling food supply, these are real challenges. But how you think about these problems determines how you respond to them. When your mind is clouded with fear, you cannot see the paths that might lead you forward. What should I do then?" Maya asked, a hint of hope flickering in her eyes for the first time. "Begin each day by planting seeds of hope," Anaya replied. "When you wake up, instead of thinking another day of suffering, think, today holds possibilities I cannot yet see. Instead of focusing on what you lack, acknowledge what you have: your health, your children's love, the support of your neighbors, the skills in your hands." Maya nodded slowly. "I can try, grandmother. But what about my husband? How can positive thoughts bring him back or tell me if he's safe? They cannot magically transport him home," Anaya admitted, "but they can give you the clarity and strength to take actions you might not otherwise take. Perhaps there's a relative in the city who could look for him. Perhaps there's work you could do here in the village to support your family while you wait." When your mind is not consumed by fear, it becomes free to find solutions. For the first time in months, Maya felt a small weight lift from her shoulders. "I understand, grandmother. I will try to think differently." Anaya smiled and patted Maya's hand. "That's all anyone can ask, my child. Try. And remember, changing your thoughts is not something you do once and are done with. It's a practice, like drawing water from the well each day. Some days it will be easier than others, but with time it becomes a habit." Maya rose to her feet, adjusting her sari. "Thank you, grandmother. I should get back to my children now." "Go with peace, my child," Anaya said. "And remember, even the darkest night ends with the dawn." As Maya walked away, her steps seemed lighter, her back a little straighter. Anaya watched her go, sending silent blessings after her. She knew Maya's journey would not be easy, but the seed of hope had been planted. Now it needed time to grow. The days passed, turning into weeks. Maya began practicing what Anaya had taught her. Each morning, before her children awoke, she would sit quietly and consciously choose thoughts of hope and possibility. "Today will bring what I need," she would whisper to herself. "I am strong enough to face whatever comes." It wasn't easy. Some mornings, fear would grip her heart so tightly that positive thoughts seemed impossible. On those days, she would visit Anaya, who would listen patiently and remind her to be gentle with herself. Gradually, Maya began to notice small changes. With a clearer mind, she remembered her skill at embroidery, something she had set aside after marriage. She began creating intricate designs on cloth, which the local merchant agreed to sell in his shop. The income was modest, but enough to buy food for her children. She also found herself more present with her children, telling them stories and singing songs instead of worrying constantly about their future. Their laughter became a balm for her wounded heart. Then, one rainy afternoon, as Maya sat under her small veranda working on an embroidery piece, a figure appeared on the path leading to her house. Squinting through the rain, she recognized the familiar gait of her husband. Dropping her work, she ran to him, her heart pounding with disbelief and joy. He was thinner than when he had left, and there was a new weariness in his eyes. But he was alive, and he had returned. As they embraced, he explained how he had found work in the city, but the employer had cheated him of his wages. Too ashamed to return empty-handed, He had taken another job, saving every coin until he had enough to bring home. He had written letters, but they had never reached her. That evening, Maya went to Anaya's house, her face radiant with happiness. She knelt before the old woman and touched her feet in respect. "Grandmother, you were right," she said, her voice full of emotion. "When I changed my thoughts, my life began to change too. My husband has returned, and though we still face challenges, I no longer feel crushed by them. I've found work that I love, and my children are happy again." Anaya smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I am happy for you, my child. But remember, life will always bring both joy and sorrow. The practice of choosing hopeful thoughts is not to deny life's difficulties, but to meet them with strength and clarity." Maya nodded. "I understand now, and I will teach this wisdom to my children, just as you taught me." Word of Maya's transformation spread through the village. Soon, others began coming to Anaya, seeking her guidance for their own troubles. To each, she offered the same simple wisdom: our thoughts shape our reality. Choose them wisely. As the seasons changed, Anaya grew older and frailer, but her mind remained sharp and her spirit strong. On her 80th birthday, the entire village gathered under the banyan tree to honor her. They brought simple gifts: a hand-woven shawl, freshly picked flowers, home-cooked sweets, but the greatest gift was the evidence of her impact on their lives. Maya, now a respected artisan whose embroidery was sought after even in distant markets, stood before the gathering and spoke. "Before I met Grandmother Anaya, I was drowning in fear and despair. She taught me that while we cannot control all that happens to us, we can control how we think about what happens. This simple wisdom changed not just my life, but the lives of my children and my husband too. We all face difficulties, failed crops, illness, loss, but now we face them together, with hope in our hearts and clarity in our minds." Others shared similar stories of overcoming grief, of finding unexpected solutions to problems, of discovering strength they didn't know they possessed, all because an old woman under a banyan tree had taught them the power of their thoughts. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the gathering, Anaya rose slowly to her feet. Though her body was bent with age, there was a timeless quality to her presence that commanded attention. The villagers fell silent, waiting for her to speak. "My dear friends," she began, her voice soft yet clear, "I am honored by your kindness today, but the wisdom you attribute to me is not mine alone. It has been passed down through generations, from one heart to another, like a flame that never dies. Life will always present challenges. The rains will fail sometimes, loved ones will leave us, plans will go awry. This is the nature of our existence, but in every moment, we have a choice to focus on what we lack or to appreciate what we have, to dwell on what might go wrong or to open ourselves to what might go right. This choice, this simple, moment-by-moment choice of where to direct our thoughts is perhaps the greatest power we possess. It cannot prevent all suffering, but it can transform how we experience that suffering and how we respond to it. As I look at each of your faces, I see the truth of this wisdom reflected back at me. I see Maya, who found strength she didn't know she had. I see Rajan, who rebuilt his home after the flood with neighbors he had previously quarreled with. I see young Priya, who overcame her fear to become the village's first female teacher. You have all taught me as much as I have taught you, and for that, I am eternally grateful." As Anaya finished speaking, the setting sun broke through the clouds, bathing the gathering in golden light. It seemed to the villagers that the light lingered longest on Anaya's face, illuminating her gentle smile and the profound wisdom in her eyes. In that moment, they understood that the true power of positive thinking wasn't just about feeling better or attracting good fortune. It was about finding the courage to face life's challenges with an open heart and a clear mind. It was about recognizing that even in our darkest moments, we have the capacity to choose hope over despair, possibility over limitation, love over fear. And in that choice lies our greatest strength and our deepest humanity. As the years passed and Anaya eventually left this world, her wisdom continued to flow through the village like the life-giving water of a hidden spring. Maya became the new keeper of this wisdom, sitting under the same banyan tree, offering guidance to those in need. And so the flame was passed from one generation to the next, illuminating the path through life's inevitable shadows. The power of our thoughts to shape our perceptions, our actions, and ultimately our lives remains one of the most profound yet accessible truths of human existence. It requires no special talent, no material wealth, no privileged position. It asks only that we become conscious of the thoughts we choose to nurture and the stories we tell ourselves about our lives. In this consciousness lies the seed of transformation for individuals, for communities, and perhaps for our world.